Rob Refsnyder's always been good for the Boston Red Sox, but his impact this season has been an absolute game changer.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Gabby, former ESPN social media associate and current host of the Boston Balling podcast as well. And I am here to bring you the latest in all things Boston Red Sox, Monday through Friday, straight to your favorite podcast feed. And want to know the best part? It's free. So if it's free, you might as well tune in. You really have nothing to lose. And I promise you, it is a good time here. Locked On is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Happy Friday and welcome to Locked On Red Sox. Congratulations on making it to the weekend. For some reason, this week felt long, even though it was actually a short week because of the Memorial Day holiday. I don't know what it is, but for some reason, these shorter weeks always feel long, and I think it's because I had the expectation that it's going to go by faster, so then it just doesn't, and it's disappointing. But we made it. The weekend is here. Hope you have some fun plans for this weekend. And the Red Sox are still floating around the 500 mark. They've been this way all season long, and it's honestly tremendous that they've been able to stay afloat due to the fact that they've had a lot of injuries this year, and they are still very much in the mix for a wild card spot. So they are winning games, but the problem is they're also losing games against the more competitive teams. So they have to start finding a way to be able to beat the teams that are very good. Like the Orioles, for example, a team in which the Red Sox have only ripped off one win against this season, and they again dropped the series earlier this week against them. That's a team that they need to find ways to beat if they want to really be in the mix down the stretch, because these divisional opponents will test this Red Sox team, and where they're at now might not be where they're at come July. And then soon we'll be talking about the trade deadline, because time is going by really fast and it'll be here before we know it. So a little bit later on the show, I'm going to be touching on the Red Sox trade deadline, having a little bit of an early conversation about what that could look like for them. But first, a player who's made a big impact this season on this Boston Red Sox team is Rob Refsnyder. Now, the Red Sox outfield is in a very interesting spot because they've been very impressive, especially defensively, with some nice plays made out there by Wilyer Abreu and Cedar Rafaela. Abreu has also been very good at the plate. And then Tyler O'Neill, who is struggling with an injury right now, which we'll also touch on a little bit later. But he's been very good at the plate for this Red Sox team. And in the outfield, we know he can make the right plays. Jarren Duran, not to mention his speed and how much of the field he can occupy when he's trying to make plays out in the outfield. So the Red Sox in the outfield right now are in a good situation, but Rob Refsnyder has been somebody who has contributed a ton this year for the team. He is hitting .342 on the season with 27 hits and 13 RBIs. He also has recorded 10 walks. So he's been very solid, and he's been taking advantage of opportunities when the Red Sox need him to. And the biggest thing to me that's impressed me about Refsnyder is he was always known for hitting well against lefties, but that's also correlating to his opportunities against righties this year. Versus left-handed pitching in 2024, he's taken 35 at-bats and recorded 12 hits and 4 RBIs. He has a batting average of 343 against left-handed pitching, an on-base percentage of 425, and a slugging percentage of 486 with an OPS of 911. And just a reminder, OPS is on-base percentage plus slugging, so that is that 911 average for him, which is very good. And then versus right-handed pitching, 44 at-bats, 16 hits so far, and he is averaging a 341 with a 431 on base percentage, 568 slugging, and a 1.000 OPS. So he's hitting very well against both righties and lefties. And in the past, the Red Sox have put him in the games in place of Jarren Duran when there was a lefty on the mound because Duran would struggle against left-handed pitching. But now Rob has cranked it up a notch to the point where he is hitting well against both. So he's a hard out now for opposing pitchers to make. I mean, he crushed a 2-run homer late in the game against the Orioles the other night when the Red Sox won big 8-3. It kind of put the game away late. So that was nice. So not only is he bringing power this year, but he's also bringing a lot of consistency at the plate in terms of his ability to read the ball, identify different pitches, and make hard contact. And the Red Sox don't have a lot of hitters who have been able to be that consistent this season. You can count on one hand right now the number of hitters who have been super reliable overall, because a lot of guys just have not been consistent at the plate and haven't been able to really find their swing. But Refsnyder is somebody who from early on in the season has been able to make a big impact for this Red Sox team, and it truly has been a difference maker for a Red Sox team that is trying desperately to stay in the mix of being a competitive team. So having Rob out there, a veteran presence among a lot of young players on this team, especially an outfield with young players like Duran, Abreu, and Rafaela, is really good to have. And he's somebody who can provide some guidance for those types of players when it comes to learning how to succeed at the major league level, learning how to fit in with the competition that comes with being at the majors, learning how to mentally refocus if you have a bad game, and showing them the ropes when it comes to succeeding in the outfield at Fenway. Now, defensively, Refsnyder obviously has had his struggles this year. He has not been the best when it comes to making those plays out there, so I definitely put him a step behind the other outfielders in terms of his defensive ability, but it's getting made up for by the offensive productivity because of the fact that the Red Sox have been hurting on offense and haven't been able to generate a lot of runs in games this season. So having Refsnyder out there, a guy who has been able to bring the offensive production, has been super key, because defensively, they have had their struggles overall in the infield in particular, but the outfield as a whole has been very good and they've been making the plays. So if we're going to have Refsnyder struggle defensively but bring the offense, I definitely will take that, because they need the offensive production since not a lot of players have been consistent. So I'm liking what Refsnyder is doing a lot this year. I think it hasn't been really talked about enough how much of an impact he actually has, and his ability to just crush baseballs and drive in runs with runners in scoring position. He has a very high success rate when it comes to bringing in runs that are on base and being that clutch situational hitter that the Red Sox need. So I'm hoping he can keep that up, because for one, the Red Sox definitely need that consistency offensively, but for two, his leadership being out there, I feel off the field, can make a difference. We saw the effect of having a big veteran player in the locker room last year in Justin Turner, and just how much of a leader he was for some of the younger players on this team. So I'm not saying Refsnyder is the only one that has to pick up that weight of being the team leader per se and just that veteran presence, but he is a veteran presence that can make a difference, and having those types of guys in the clubhouse can make a difference for a team no matter what. So I really like having Refsnyder here. He's been able to hit well against both righties and lefties, which I found to have been super impressive by him because that wasn't something we were always getting from him in the past. It almost feels like a whole new player this year, very confident. He was injured early on, but seems to have bounced back from his injury pretty well. So I'm rooting for Refsnyder to continue to contribute. This Red Sox team is absolutely going to need it, especially when it comes to the offense. And hopefully he can continue to help put a lot of runs on the board for this Red Sox team. Coming up, though, it may be a little early for this conversation, but it's never too early, really, to start thinking about the trade deadline as it is right around the corner. What could that look like for the Red Sox? That's going to be talked about next. Are you a big fan of sports betting? Or are you not really, but you simply just want to win a lot of money? Either way, there's nothing wrong with wherever you're at, and FanDuel has you covered. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel is a great way to make a ton of money. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. Also, you won't be disappointed if you check out Locked On Sports today, as we have launched the first ever National Sports 24/7 streaming channel. It's available on YouTube and also on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. It really brings you the biggest stories in sports. So if you're looking to stay caught up in all things going on in sports, no matter what time zone you're in, Locked On Sports Today absolutely has you covered. It's almost that time, believe it or not. Before we know it, the trade deadline is going to be here, and we're going to be wondering what direction the Red Sox could go in when it comes to moves they make and where they're at. And if we look back at last year's trade deadline, the Red Sox had a very underwhelming deadline. I mean, they acquired Luis Urias, and that was pretty much the only significant move that they made right at the deadline. And even a couple moves they made prior to the trade deadline, like trading Kike Hernandez and acquiring pitching, that was all considered part of their trade deadline, but they weren't major moves. And the most disappointing thing about it was that the Red Sox were about 2 games out of a wild card spot at the time when the trade deadline happened. And I wished that they had added to the team to put themselves in a place to get a chance to be able to get one of those wild card spots. But what the trade deadline told me and the message that it sent was that they didn't feel like they were capable of competing last year, and they didn't think it was worth getting rid of some pieces that they could use in the future to put themselves in contention last year. And I think it was definitely disappointing to a lot of fans because people really thought that they were going to be in a position to fight for a wild card spot. So now we have this year, and the Red Sox are in a very similar situation, floating around 500, going back and forth between 500 on the dot, maybe 1 or 2 games over 500, or even a game under 500. And they really are only a couple games, again, out of a wild card spot at this moment. So you have to wonder what direction the Red Sox could go in at this trade deadline, because it's almost like deja vu from last year in terms of where they're at. And then last year they ended up finishing the season with 78 wins. And that is something that could happen this year if they don't add and they are potentially in contention. So the question becomes, what do they do at the trade deadline this year? If they are still in this same scenario come trade deadline time, they're floating around 500, or they start to slip, then I think they start to sell off pieces at the deadline, especially impending free agents, and they start to think more about the future because they don't want to be a team that does all of these things to add to the team and start to deplete some of their future just to maybe squeeze into the playoffs and lose in the first round. That doesn't seem to be the mindset Craig Breslow wants to have. So this month of June is going to be a big test for them. Lots of really tough opponents on the schedule and teams that could really put the Red Sox to the test moving forward. So I'm interested in seeing how that works out for this Boston Red Sox team. Really, where are they going to be at? So after June, I think we'll get a good sense of where they're going to be when it comes to the rest of the regular season and if they realistically can compete with other teams. So if they go through the month of June playing similar baseball to what they are now and they end June around 500 or they slip back, then I think they start to think about selling pieces. And some of those pieces make sense, like Kenley Jansen, because he is an impending free agent, as well as the fact that he's probably nearing the end of his career. So for him, he might prefer to go to a team that is more likely to have a chance to win a World Series than stick around in Boston and try to get them into the playoffs and then have it not work out or have them lose in the first round. He definitely wants to win, and he's been pretty vocal with the Red Sox front office about frustrations about the lack of moves that they've made over the last year or so. So I could see Jansen being interested and open to being moved come the trade deadline. And for the Red Sox, Kenley Jansen isn't a player that's going to be part of the future longer term. And if they're looking to build for the future and bring in players who will be part of that future, it could make sense to move Kenley Jansen because they could always find somebody else to try out the closing role and maybe do some experimenting there and see if they have somebody internally who could work out in that role in the long run. Because if the Red Sox conclude at the trade deadline that they likely won't be a playoff contending team this year, then why not try things out? That is the opportunity to try something new, see if there's a player on this roster who could play in the closing spot and be somebody who could contribute in that way to this Red Sox team. So Kenley Jansen pops up as a player who could very likely end up being moved. But if the Red Sox are in contention and at the trade deadline they decide they want to add pieces, then I think they keep Kenley Jansen for the rest of this year, because it's nice to have that security blanket of an established closer who knows how to lock down under pressure and somebody who knows how to perform in the postseason, because Kenley has so much experience pitching in the playoffs. So if they are going to be in contention, then I don't see them moving Kenley. Another player who falls into the category of somebody who could be moved if they are at the point where they're not going to contend is Chris Martin. Another pitcher who has been very good for this Red Sox team, was one of the best relievers in baseball last year. And this year, he started off a little bit slow, had his struggles for sure on the mound, but he has since cleaned it up, and he's pitched very well since then. So Martin is somebody who I could see the Red Sox maybe moving if they are not in contention, because of the fact that his value would be high. He's pitching well. If he continues to pitch well for this Red Sox team as that cleanup guy, the bridge guy to Kenley Jansen, then I could see a lot of teams being interested in him at the trade deadline. Teams that are going for a championship now and need that lockdown guy as their 7th or 8th inning guy to slot in before they bring in their closer if they're trying to win a World Series. So it could make a lot of sense to move Chris Martin for some young talent if the Red Sox are at the point where they're going to sell, because they need to think about the young pieces that they need to get to bring into the system. And Craig Breslow very much is a big pitching guy. He brought in a lot of young arms via trade this offseason. So if he does move Chris Martin, I could see it being for pitching prospects that he feels the Red Sox could develop for the future to be part of a contending team moving forward. So he's another name that pops into my head. And somebody else who likely could end up being moved is Tyler O'Neill. Now, this one is interesting because he obviously is battling with an injury right now, which I'll touch on a little bit later in the show, but he's somebody who could provide a lot of value on a team as a rental that is looking to win, especially because of his defensive abilities. He could provide an outfield with that type of value. And he was hitting very well early on for the Red Sox, and then he kind of slowed down since then. But I think the injury plays a factor in that. So if he gets himself back on track at the plate and he starts hitting very well again, then the Red Sox could consider moving him, especially because of how well Wilyer Abreu has been playing on both sides of the ball this year and the defense that Cedar Rafaela provides. I mean, you're losing the offensive productivity that O'Neill provides, but the hope would also be that Casas is coming back soon so he can slot back into the lineup and be productive towards the top of it. So it's almost a give and take type of situation. So if they move O'Neill, then their outfield situation becomes a little bit more clear because they do have some outfield prospects in the system who could be very good pieces moving forward. So if the Red Sox are looking to sell at the deadline, Tyler O'Neill is somebody who I feel could make sense for them to shop because he could provide value to a team, especially if he gets his offensive numbers back up. Now, if the Red Sox are in contention at the trade deadline, he still might be somebody they consider moving if they get good pieces in return that they feel could slot into a contending team now. So I feel like there's a possibility O'Neill could end up getting moved either way. It just depends on Craig Breslow's thoughts and where the Red Sox are at. And I also think it would depend on what the return would be for him if a team were to make an offer and what that would look like in the package that he would get in return, whether he thinks it's worth it to execute on that or not. So that's an interesting name that I'm thinking of. So the Red Sox have a few players that they could move at the deadline if they were to not be in contention. There are guys that they want to keep. I think like Tanner Houck makes sense. Garrett Whitlock makes sense. Unfortunately, since he's injured, they wouldn't really be able to trade him right now anyway, because it would be tough to get high value players for him. So young pieces they definitely want to keep, but I think even Nick Pivetta could be in jeopardy of being traded if the Red Sox are not in contention and he continues to pitch as well as he is, because the Red Sox are looking more towards the future and he could be somebody who could turn into a good future piece down the road if they were to move him somewhere. So they could get a return that is well worth it for them in the long run. So lots to think about for this Red Sox team as they enter closer and closer to the trade deadline, with summer coming up, and before you know it, we'll be talking about the trade deadline for real. So we'll see what the Red Sox decide. We'll also see how this month of June goes for them. Could be tough with some tough opponents on the schedule, but I'm really looking forward to it. Coming up, what's going on with Tyler O'Neill? When is he supposed to be back? All of these questions will be answered next. You know that instant confidence boost you get from an outfit that makes you look really good? That's what I get with Stitch Fix. With Stitch Fix, you get a stylist who understands your style, size, and budget. They do all the shopping for you. It's the easiest way to update your wardrobe this season. You can easily upgrade your wardrobe this year seamlessly. All you have to do is give your stylist your size, style, and budget preferences, and then they'll match you with outfits that work for you based on that criteria that you're looking for. Style that makes you feel as good as you look. Get started today at stitchfix.com/MLB and get $20 off your first fix. That's stitchfix.com/MLB for $20 off. stitchfix.com/MLB. Must redeem within 7 days of sign up. I'm telling you, you will feel so much better about yourself and your fashion and what clothes you're wearing with Stitch Fix. So check them out today. Also, just a reminder to check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. No matter what time zone you're in or where you are located, Locked On Sports Today will keep you caught up in all things going on in sports at any time of day. We'll have the biggest storylines for you with all of our experts here at Locked On. So you can find that either on YouTube or on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. It's a great way to stay caught up with all things going on in sports. So make sure you check that out today. Tyler O'Neill, a player who the Red Sox traded for in the offseason, came in and made a huge impact offensively early on, but even going into the season, injuries were a concern for him. He did spend a good portion of the last couple seasons on the injured list, and that was something that going into the season I was worried about with him is, can he stay healthy? Unfortunately, he has been placed on the 10-day injured list. This was retroactive to May 26th due to right knee inflammation. So the corresponding move was the Red Sox recalled infielder Manuel Valdez. So it's definitely unfortunate for him and for the Red Sox, the fact that he cannot play for these next several games. But he started off very well at the plate. He was hitting 320 with a 433 on base percentage and 693 slugging through the end of April, but cooled off significantly in May. 151 with a 244 on base percentage and 301 slugging. He did tell reporters recently that his knee has been bothering him for a little bit. So my guess is that that was probably affecting his swing. It was kind of like the Rafael Devers situation when he got injured and he was not looking very good at the plate prior to that, but then he got the rest he needed, healed, came back, and now he's hitting very well again at the plate. So that might be what it takes for O'Neill to be on the injured list for a while and make sure that he's staying healthy and doing things the right way so that he's not sidelined for longer than he really needs to be. So Alex Cora did give an update on him and said he's day to day and should be fine. He said there's no structural damage, just a little inflammation. So they're just taking precautions, seeing how he feels and reevaluating him each day. But that is good news because as long as he stays on track, he should be back in that timeline. And Alex Cora knows how important he is to this Red Sox team, especially his bat that had been very good prior to it starting to be bothersome for him. So I think the Red Sox will really do everything they can to get him back as quickly as possible. The good thing is it doesn't sound like he's going to need to be sidelined for a long time, needing surgery or anything like that. But it's unfortunate in terms of the fact that the Red Sox just keep getting hurt, just so many injuries one after the other. And I just want them to be healthy. I mean, it would be so nice to see them fully healthy, but now we have Valdez called back up, who hopefully can pick up the productivity a little bit. He did have his struggles for sure, especially defensively. He wasn't all that great, but at the plate, he was starting to find his swing before he got sent back down to AAA. So hopefully he can be productive in this short stint that he's up on the major league roster. I think when it comes to the Red Sox and the injury situation, they definitely are looking at the long game here. They want to make sure they're not rushing anybody back. It's already, at the point where they've had Garrett Whitlock, who is going to have to miss the rest of the season. They have Lucas Giolito, who's missing all season. So they don't want players to be in a situation where they end up like Trevor Story, who goes down and then they find out later on that he won't be able to come back this year. So they're definitely taking precautions with the injuries. It's still early enough in the season to where you want to take your time and make sure these guys are fully healthy before they come back, because the last thing the Red Sox would want is to rush somebody back and then have it impact their long-term ability to contribute to this team. So I think the Red Sox are going about this the right way. It's definitely something to keep an eye on with O'Neill, just because he has had problems with his injuries before. He only played 168 games combined over the 2022 and 2023 seasons, hitting 229 with a 310 on base percentage and 397 slugging. He went to the IL at various times for a right shoulder impingement, a left hamstring strain, a lower back strain, and a right foot sprain. So lots of different injuries that he's experienced over the last couple seasons. But he definitely is somebody that needs to stay on the field, because that's what I always said was I believe he can make a really big impact to this Red Sox team if he can stay healthy. And so far, early on in the season, he was definitely showing that he has that capability to have a really good Fenway-friendly bat and be able to really make that type of an impact. And his defense certainly will be missed too, for sure, while he's gone. But I'm hoping that with the way that this defense has been playing lately in the outfield, that they can pick up the slack for him, because it's a lot of pressure on a player to feel like they desperately need him and they're being let down because he's not around. So I'm hoping that the Red Sox can pull their weight without him and be able to proceed with continuing to try to find ways to win games. But it won't be a long absence for him. So if they can just string pieces together and find ways to win, and hopefully their pitching can keep them in some of these games, especially the starting rotation, then they should be okay to at least tread water in his absence. And hopefully when he comes back from the IL, he can contribute offensively in the same way he did early on in the season, because that version of Tyler O'Neill was pretty spectacular and fun to watch. And I enjoyed being able to see him go out there and crush baseballs and hit home runs and drive in base runners. So I'm definitely going to be looking for the Red Sox to get that guy back when he comes back from the IL. So I'm glad they're nipping this in the butt. I'm sure it was something that was a pending problem for a long time for him, and it was bothering him, and he was trying to play through it, and then it got to the point where he just couldn't anymore. So now they're resting him, making sure that this gets settled and that he can get himself fully healthy and get to the point where he can contribute for real for this Red Sox team and be put in the best place to be able to help with allowing this team to succeed. So lots of tests the Red Sox are being put through this year, but hopefully they can continue to play their version of baseball and cut down on the errors and have players stay healthy and get the bats moving again consistently, because when their bats are moving, they can be super competitive because they have a lot of the other pieces in place. It's just a matter of their bats being more consistent than they are, because they'll hit a lot one night and then won't hit much at all the next night and score 1 or 2 runs maybe. So they have to hit more frequently and be able to stay consistent at the plate. But we'll see what happens in this month of June. Big test for this team coming up here. So you have to do your job as a fan, as always, and keep the faith. Go Red Sox, and I will catch you on the flip side.